Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Supergirl fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss Supergirl in the DCAU is the host of Missing Frames, returning guest, Sean Eastridge. Welcome back.
Anthony, what a pleasure to be back. I love this show. I love you and all you people out there. I love you too.
I'm very happy to have you back. You joined me late last year for an epic, wonderful discussion of John Byrne's Man of Steel.
Oh, such a blast.
And one of the things we talked about there was this stress test that the post-crisis reboot put the Superman mythology through. And we talked about some of the ways that manifested. And one of those ways is with respect to Supergirl. And we see yet another manifestation of that in the Supergirl of the DC animated universe, who makes about a dozen appearances across Superman the Animated Series, Batman the Animated Series, and Justice League Unlimited. And I would say for myself, this is a version of Supergirl who looms fairly large in my super fandom. And I think she was impactful despite relatively few appearances in the grand scheme of things. I'm excited to discuss. Let me ask you first, what sort of role does this Supergirl occupy in your own fandom of the character?
I would have to say this is probably the definitive, for a while, it was the definitive version. You know, I'd grown up, I'd seen the Helen Slater film, the 1984 film. That was probably my first exposure to a Supergirl. But this animated series, as for many of us growing up in the early 90s, like this and Batman, this entire DCAU, it was such an incredible definitive moment in my life as a fan of Superman. But it kind of created the definitive version of the characters in my mind for so many of these characters. Supergirl being one of them, to the point where like I realize a lot of the stuff I think about Supergirl and feel about Supergirl comes from this series, this interpretation of the character. You don't see a lot of it represented, or you see a version of it, but maybe not as definitive, not as well thought out, not as I guess defined is the right word, as you do in this series. It feels like a very well-rounded, very there's no question who she is, what she wants, and why she does what she does. And she's very confident in a way that we don't always see with this character. So for me, this was it. And this was kind of sort of the benchmark that all the other interpretations had to reach.
Right on. I mean, I had a similar experience watching Superman the Animated Series as it was originally airing, and that certainly hit me at a formative point in my fandom. I think that's part of the reason why a big part of me gravitates towards this version of Supergirl. But yeah, I think this was a version, I think there was a very clear vision for who this character is. And I think this was a really winning, endearing version of the character with a lot of positive attributes. And it's interesting because on the one hand, this character does certainly borrow from other versions of Supergirl, yet is also her own singular individual in the grand scheme of things. This is Kara, and it is Kara here, not Kara.
It's Kara.
It's Kara. What a relief.
What is the tally, by the way? Because I know it's been a lot of comics talk, but like as far as the live action where we actually hear the name spoken, what has been the tally? We've got Kara in the CW series. We've got Kara in this new upcoming movie, but Kara in DCAU. So
Kara here and Kara in Smallville.
Okay. So it's 2 and 2 right now. And we've got the film coming out, but we already know it's Kara in that. So,
but yeah, this is Kara in Z from Argo, Krypton's sister planet. So this is a very specific version with her own look that would eventually bleed over into the comic. So, we've been talking a lot about Supergirl's evolving look over the course of the eras here. And this is one that I think is so distinct. We have, of course, our blonde hair, our headband. We have the white half top, white gloves, a blue skirt, and the red boots. What do you make of this visual depiction of the character?
It's so funny because until it's pointed out to me, like for instance, the Justice League episodes, realizing they were like, oh, she made her costume look more like yours, Superman. And I just don't think about it because this animated series, like I was saying, is so definitive in my life. I never once realized that the costume is different from what we are used to seeing in the comics and the popular interpretations of her up to that point. And I think that just speaks to the quality of the storytelling, the quality of the show, that it did bleed into the other mediums and it did have a major influence. We saw that with Batman. We see it with Superman. And that team of creators was just so good at telling these stories that you see a lot of their ideas. They were taking ideas, obviously, from the wealth of material they had access to. But like you said, Supergirl, I always thought this was like, oh, well, she's Superman's cousin in this version, not realizing that it's a sister planet, Argo. There isn't a specific direct relation between the characters. And I just never thought of it because, again, to me, this feels so definitive. There's kind of like the joking, oh, I'm your cousin visiting from Smallville. And that's the reference they make. But the costume itself, I just think of this as a definitive version, even though it is strikingly different from what we're used to seeing.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I don't know what the fan response was at the time when she made her debut in the late 90s in the animated series. If they were up in arms.
What a blissful time for us to be kids. Think like it was like, this is all we got, and not to have to be comic book fans saying, oh, they changed this and they did that. How dare they? Like, just to be a blissfully ignorant child and like, this is perfect. I love it.
I know. How lovely to actually not know what everyone's complaints were at the time. Says the guy who's on the podcast complaining about stuff all the time. So I guess I don't have a leg to stand on. But yeah, no, there is something kind of wistful about that time. But yeah, I mean, I guess I recognize that it was a departure visually from what we had seen before. But yeah, I guess it never bumped me in any way. It felt like it's its own thing. It worked. And now kind of looking at it in the larger context, I still love the look. And I think maybe the reason why I like it even more is that you have yet more contrast here. I mean, I've talked about how I don't love the blue top and the blue skirt. I feel like it's just a little too much blue. So I do tend to gravitate towards the red skirt. And then that gives you that blue-red contrast. But here you have the white and the blue and the red of the boots and the cape. And I think that elevates it even more. I really, really do like this costume.
Oh, for sure. And the other thing is the personality. And, everyone who is listening to this, I hope you've listened to the other episodes Anthony's been doing. It's been such a blast listening to your Supergirl coverage, but listening to those episodes about the Silver Age and just kind of how sort of docile she was originally. She was very much like, oh, I'm just going to sit around and do that. And when I say I think of the definitive version of Supergirl kind of, for me, was born in this animated series, I've always kind of thought of her as not completely rebellious, but younger, a little bit more of, I guess rebellious is the right term. Like, she doesn't necessarily follow Superman's lead. She's not saying like, all right, I'll wait around. She does her own thing and it feels natural. And I've always thought of Supergirl as that character, which is why it is fun to go back and look at the sort of original interpretation and the advent of that character with her being so agreeable and sort of like, all right, I'll just hang out here. Thanks, Cal. All of these things and all of the really cool and different interpretations of the character that are instilled in this animated version. Like I said, I kind of took them as like, well, this is how it is. And realizing that that's not the case and that they were kind of taking even from the version that we were seeing in the Triangle era that was happening in this same period of time. Like, it is a different version. And I like that it skews younger, that she does kind of feel more like a Dick Grayson or kind of that sort of like I'm, I'm sort of the punk kid, but not in an overtly arrogant way. She's still got the spark.
100%. That's one of my core takeaways in rewatching virtually all of these episodes is that I feel like the characterization was so on point here. And I think it's a combination of the writing and the vocal performance. She was voiced by Nicole Tom. I don't know if you ever watched The Nanny back in the day, but I did. And I feel like that's her live action claim to fame. She played Maggie, the eldest of the 3 Sheffield children, for any Nanny fans out there.
I didn't know that, but like literally, no joke. I was at the Huntsville Expo hanging out with dear sweet Ma Kent, Neva Howell. And when I went to grab lunch, The Nanny was on TV and I was watching it. It was all meant to be just to bring it full circle in this moment with you referencing it. So I just wanted to put that out there in the world.
Yeah. I mean, because I watched The Nanny as a kid and I remember when Nicole Tom was cast as Supergirl. I mean, I don't know if I read it in TV Guide or I saw the name in the credits or what, but like I remember making that connection of like, oh.
But as a Nanny fanboy, you were like, this is what I've always wanted.
Yeah. Exactly. Fanboy's too strong a word. But yeah, I did watch and I was happy to have her in this role. And I thought she did such a great job. And between the vocal performance and the writing, Yeah, you end up with a Kara who has a lot of spirit. She can be headstrong and overeager and brash at times. Yet, to your point, I couldn't agree more, doesn't veer into the territory of being, like you said, arrogant or abrasive. And I feel like that's always a risk. I think there's a charm to the character, that youthful exuberance. Her heart's always in the right place, and she proves herself to be capable time and again. The fact that in the first episode of Justice League Unlimited, Initiation, she can say to Captain Atom, "Why don't you take the stick out, Corporal," and stick her tongue out at him.
Right.
And we're still on this character's side. I think says a lot. Like, they really struck a great balance. And yes, I appreciate it even more now, having gone through that earlier Silver Age material, to see a version of the character with some spirit. It worked great. So that went a long way. I want to talk more about the context in terms of when this hit versus what was going on in the comics, but also circling back to something you were saying before about your first experience of Supergirl with the movie. As we're talking, I'm realizing this was the first multimedia adaptation of any Supergirl character since the Helen Slater movie.
Right.
Which is wild. And that's one of the things we did our whole episode going through the various iterations. But what's also interesting are the instances where Supergirl wasn't adapted, right? She debuts in the comics in the late 50s. She's MIA from the Filmation cartoons. She's MIA from Super Friends. Then she gets the live action Helen Slater outing that unfortunately doesn't launch her own franchise for reasons that are probably apparent when you look at the movie, despite.
Yeah, I think that maybe the reaction to that film scared them. Like, I think they didn't know what to do with Supergirl. I think you and Ed Gross talked about this a little bit. They weren't sure, who is this? Because she is, in a lot of interpretations, the danger is, oh, she's just female Superman. Same personality, same vibe. I'm, all shucks, I'm going to be a good person. And I think the reaction to that film really set the character back and scared people. They didn't know what to do. And even to the point where Byrne and the rest of the team, we're not even going to do, they'd already decided Superman's the last son. It's literally the last survivor of Krypton. They went really wacky with their interpretation of Supergirl with Matrix. And I think, in a way, I didn't even really think about that this is kind of a whole new version and a really bold, this is what we want from this character and who we think this character should be. And it's very successful. And as you were saying, it honors the past. It walks the fine line of she's still decent. She wants to do the right thing, but without sort of just being a clone of Superman. They really found the right balance with the character.
Yeah, I think putting her into this kid sister mode, I think ultimately served her well. But yeah, post that Helen Slater movie, she's not adapted in the Ruby Spears cartoon, in the live action Superboy series, or in Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, in any way, shape, or form. And so a lot of time had passed, and the Helen Slater movie was all we had until that point. So I think that's probably another reason why, at least for us, this looms so large, was because, there had been a lot of space in between these adaptations. And I think that allowed this one to maybe make an even bigger impact. But yeah, in terms of when this landed compared to what's going on in the comics at the time. So Supergirl, Kara In-Z in this instance, she makes her debut in the 2-part Little Girl Lost from Superman the Animated Series in 1998. May 1998, if I'm not mistaken, which is when issue 23 of the Peter David written series came out. So at this point in time, we're about a couple of years into this Peter David written series where the protoplasmic matrix entity has merged with human Linda Danvers to form this Earthborn angel being, which we're going to be talking a lot more about. But I mean, it's amazing to even contemplate a scenario where the DCAU would have attempted that version.
Kudos to them again because talking about Supergirl's history, where we were at in the comics at the time, until kind of listening to you guys talking on the show and going into it myself and reading all the different interpretations as I get excited for the new film coming out, I had always just thought, well, Supergirl is Superman's cousin. That's what she's always been. And so to know about all these wacky interpretations just gives me even more respect for the fact that they went nope, she's the cousin, quote unquote, and that's it. We're not doing anything wacky and weird.
So from what I was able to gather through a little bit of research, and this is what I would have assumed anyway, it seems that Bruce Timm and company had wanted to do an even more traditional take on the character, actually have her be Kara Zor-El, cousin from Krypton.
Okay.
But we're told no, because like you were saying, and as we talked about previously, at this point in time in DC Comics, Kal-El was the sole survivor of Krypton. And that's why we had the Matrix Supergirl and the Pocket Universe Zod and so on. And so the compromise, it seems here, is to make this Kara come from the sister planet of Argo. So they're like cousins. And when Clark is talking to Jimmy at the end of the Little Girl Lost two-parter, he's like, oh, have you met my cousin? I think you'll really like her. So she poses as his cousin. Ultimately, it has the same effect. I mean, we spoke about this at length, right? When we talked Man of Steel, and I gave my whole thesis about how it was important to put the Superman mythology through that stress test, see what was so undeniable that it had to come back. I stand by that. I'm at peace with the choices that were made during that time. Nevertheless, there is a part of me that looks at something like this and I say to myself, fine, they made it work and the effect is ultimately the same, but it's like, I don't know, is it worth it to force this distinction? Like, I don't know exactly what it's really serving here, but yeah. I can live with it.
Yeah, no, I just think there's something so special about Clark finding someone who is a long lost relative. You know, I think there are again, I can see the benefits of Ma and Pa Kent passing away early and not being a part of his life, but I also see the benefits of them being an active participant and being there to give him advice and being kind of the hub for him to return to go back to Smallville and get their advice for things. Same thing with Kara, but I really, really love the version where it's not just like she's an angel or she's a blob. Like, I just love the simplicity and the straightforward nature of like, no, they are a family. And whether it's like, again, just saying they're cousins and it's the sister planet, whatever. But I like them being, like you said, she's kind of taking on instead of being sort of the like, I'm just a Superman clone, and I just am the same character, but a girl, her taking on the kid sister vibe. I really like that. And I like it as a dynamic for Clark as well. Just having someone to take under his wing and train and look out for and sort of guide is a really cool idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to dig in more to individual episodes, but let me give a quick rundown for the audience just to kind of give an overview of her appearances in the DCAU. So like we said, she makes her debut in Little Girl Lost. She returns and gets the spotlight in Unity, which is a very bizarre Smallville-centric episode. And then she has a small but critical role in Legacy, the two-part series finale. She also appears in the Batman episode Girls' Night Out, where she teams up with Barbara Gordon Batgirl to take on Livewire, Harley, and Ivy. And then she makes 7 non-cameo appearances across Justice League Unlimited, beginning with Initiation, where she has her first mission with GL, Green Arrow, and Captain Atom. Fearful Symmetry, where she faces off for the first time against her older clone, Galatea, a dead ringer for Power Girl. More to say on her. Smaller appearances in The Return and Flashpoint. The spotlight again in Panic in the Sky, where she has her rematch and final battle with Galatea. She also appears in Chaos at the Earth's Core, where, to your point, there she adopts a more traditional-looking Supergirl costume. For better or worse, we can talk about that. Right. And then she makes her final appearance in one of the last episodes of the entire series, Far From Home, where she relocates to the 31st century with the Legion of Superheroes.
Mm-hmm. I have feelings about that.
I have feelings about that too. I not to short circuit this and jump to the end, but I do feel like we can look at a lot of what came before that final episode and put together a nice little arc for the character. And then I feel like there were a couple of big swerves in Far From Home that I think could have worked with a little bit more setup. And unfortunately, we didn't get it. And there were some choices there that just felt awfully abrupt. And I don't know that they really did her a lot of favors in the end. But I think prior to that, when you look at all of this together, I think it does actually form a nice little arc for her. But kind of on that note, we've been talking a lot about the characterization and the costume, things like that. But I guess in terms of her role in the DCAU and an arc to whatever extent we can call it that, just big picture thoughts, observations, what stands out to you?
I love this interpretation of the character, and I love the story overarching what they have for her. And what was a pleasant surprise for me as somebody who really enjoys the Superman animated series and kind of was bummed that it sort of, they'd talked about legacy kind of leading into a potential season 4 where Clark would kind of have to win back the population of Metropolis after being brainwashed by Darkseid and being evil. I really liked that idea, and I was always kind of bummed that it just went straight into Justice League. And so to see them kind of pick up the threads that I thought would not really, particularly with Kara and also with Superman continuing that story, I really appreciated that they do address kind of like what Kara went through and how she dealt with it, and bringing in Galatea and like what happened. Like, oh yeah, you were at Cadmus for a little while and you were unconscious and we cloned you. Whether or not it's completely successful, I think I agree with you. I think it's more successful than not, the outcome of her character. But that was, I think overall, it's a really cool, exciting interpretation. I almost wish we'd gotten more of her and got to spend more time with her.
Yes. And I think that's the biggest critique or complaint that I have here, is that, yeah, I just wish we had more. I wish that we could have delved into her character even more deeply. And what really crystallized that for me is reading Superman Adventures number 21, The Last Daughter of Argo, where you get to see the final days of that planet and what led to her being put to sleep in that cryo chamber. And you see more of her early weeks in Smallville on the farm. And it delves into these fears that she has of the cold because of what she endured before being put into cryo sleep. So there was a lot more that was delved into in that one issue. And I said to myself, oh man, this would have been amazing to have seen this baked into the actual animated episodes. That really would have gone a long way. I guess I didn't even totally realize what I was missing until I read that Superman Adventures issue. And I'm like, oh man.
And have you read the Superman Adventures run?
Not all of it. I've read a decent chunk of it, and I have the compendium that's out, and I'll be getting the next one that's coming out. So at some point I'll make my way through all of it. But yeah, at this point I would say I've read selections.
I will say this to you and to anyone listening. I am obviously a massive fan of the Superman animated series, but I always feel, especially in comparison to Batman, and I think Mike Carlin told me this as well, but the team, they just weren't into Superman as much as they were into Batman. And I think knowing that and rewatching the animated series of Superman as many times as I have through the years, you can kind of see it. It's not as, I don't know, the storytelling isn't as engaging. You can feel a little bit of that disconnect. But Superman Adventures, the comic series, I had never really read it before until the past year or so. And all of the depth, all of the character development that I kind of want from the Superman animated series, it's in there. And it's incredible. Some of the best Superman stories, period. I think I was maybe turned off from reading it just because I was like, well, I don't need an animated comic series. I've got the animated show. But so many great stories are in there from so many incredible writers. And the Supergirl story was just, for me, having been reading through the series from the beginning, just further emphasize that, looking at that issue, reading it, getting a glimpse into the story. Because you watch the show and you're kind of like, she's pretty well adjusted for somebody who, like, this tragic thing on Argo, her family's gone. She seems pretty like gung-ho and having fun, and she's kind of spunky and like, and you read this issue and you're getting all the trauma, all the character development. And I wish they'd maybe put more of that into the series itself, but I can't recommend this comic series enough. And we'll put a call out to DC, the DC Infinite app. We have the Batman Adventures. We don't have Superman Adventures. Let's get on that, please, because it's such a great collection of stories.
Yeah. I know the Superman Adventures were previously on there. They were removed. My understanding was there's some issue with having kids comics on there, but you're saying the Batman ones are still on there?
Batman ones are still on there. And also what's funny is this comic is more mature than the series, the animated series. Like, it's something obviously a kid, when I say more mature, it's not like, oh my God, like it's 18 plus, but like the stories they're telling delve into darker themes and darker scenarios than the animated series does. Some stuff that I thought, I was like, oh wow, like this feels like it could have been in the mainline Superman title. So for me, the fact that they're kind of like, oh, it's a kid's thing, because I read that too. And I don't know. I'm not buying it. And this is my official call to DC to put all that stuff back on there, especially with the Batman adventures on there right now.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, I mean, I think in looking at her evolution across the DCAU and specifically on screen, yeah, I mean, I think you see her step up, you see her grow up, and that's in keeping with what we've been seeing for Supergirl across her various iterations, which has emerged as a bit of a theme here in doing these episodes because, yeah, she's in her teens. I mean, I don't know that they ever put a hard number on it early on when she's first introduced, but by her final appearance in Far From Home, she's celebrating her 21st birthday. So we do see her grow up over the course of these episodes and step up. I mean, by the time we get even just to Legacy, the series finale of Superman, the animated series, when Superman is missing, we'll find out he's been brainwashed by Darkseid and then he'll lead an invasion force. But Supergirl is in the fortress, remote controlling Clark and Superman robots to try to maintain the illusion that Superman is there. And when he
literally holding down the fort. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when he does lead that invasion force, she's the one who's trying to break through to him. So she had a critical role there. And then, yeah, by the time we get to JLU, the fact that she's part of this team and being included in these missions. And then I think if there's another piece that's really distinct to Supergirl, it's the Galatea business, the fact that she has been cloned and she has this older evil counterpart and they have this pair of battles and she's ultimately able to prevail in the second one. I think that goes a long way. And really jumping ahead to the end here, and this is what I was getting at before, I guess, this whole idea of her choosing to go to the 31st century. What was tough about that episode was we open and we have Supergirl in a training scenario in that hard light metropolis simulation. But you have Green Arrow and Superman watching and talking about how she's celebrating her 21st birthday, but declined an offer to go out with Green Arrow and Black Canary. But it's at this point, and it's never come up in any of the other episodes. But finally here, all of a sudden, Green Arrow's talking about how she must feel like she's in the Stone Age here because she comes from this advanced planet.
Right?
And Green Arrow finally points out the fact that, hey, Clark, you got here as a baby. This is mostly all you've known, but she actually grew up on another planet. And it's just wild to me that it takes years. It takes
the entire arc of this character.
Yeah, it takes until her final appearance. And even then, she's not even saying it for herself. It's another character saying it on her behalf. It was very odd to me and really felt like an outlier with respect to Supergirl and the DCAU and the DCAU generally. I mean, I'm one of the biggest proponents of this animated universe. I love it. It was so formative. I watched all of these shows as they were originally airing. I've gone back to them over the years, but this is one instance where I'm kind of scratching my head. I talk about Smallville a lot, but when it comes to listening, one podcast is at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring tremendous insight, passion, and humor to each and every episode. And while their series rewatch has concluded, the podcast continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk. Listen wherever you get podcasts and keep an eye out for the other shows on the Always Hold On To network. I'm a parent, which means that a family-friendly comic shop is a must, and there's none better than Aw Yeah Comics. Visit one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, home to our pal, Sweet Sweet Bernie. Follow them on social media and at awyeahcomics.com for news about signings, live sales, and much more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you.
I'm with you 100%. To get to this episode and suddenly all of that info and character stuff is dumped. And I was like, what? Well, I was suddenly like very invested because I was like, well, hold on a second. Now we're finally talking about the trauma and we're talking about this stuff. And again, like this is, I went through the JLU episodes before I went to the comics, the Superman adventures. So I'm thinking to myself, where was this development early on? This would have been great to talk about. But the other piece to this that really threw me off, and I wonder if you felt the same way, Anthony, was Superman being like, yeah, I should have told her that I really care for her and love her. And I'm thinking to myself, why is this all coming out just now? And also, Superman has always felt like very protective and loving and caring for her. Now we're suggesting that suddenly I think fans and people think about Supergirl. Oh, she's always going to be in Superman's shadow. She doesn't really have a life of her own. I feel like the series has already kind of established her and her dynamic and who she is. And then we're kind of taking a bunch of steps back and saying, nope, she's always going to be in Superman. No matter what she does, she is only going to be Superman's cousin. And it was just like, this might have been okay if this was how this arc started, but it feels very strange that we're suddenly addressing a lot of these things and these ideas and complaints at the very end and using it as a justification for where she ends up in her decision at the end of this episode to say the future.
Agreed. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, the whole idea that she feels out of place because she had a whole upbringing on another more advanced world. And as Ollie points out, this is like the Stone Age to her. Valid. The fact that, hey, she operates on Earth where she's in Superman's shadow. And what does that feel like? Valid. But to our point here, it's like, if you're going to introduce that, I think that needs to be done a lot sooner and really layered into the proceedings as opposed to just tacked on here so that we can get to the end. Now, I don't know, maybe the counter argument, because I say to myself, if we didn't have those moments here, would I be sitting here saying, they never even addressed these things. So it's like, I guess they got there, but it was not an elegant way to get there.
Yeah, it felt like retroactively they were like, we know we want her to end up with Brainiac 5 in the future. How do we get there? And that's, I think, what throws me off, because I'm like, I really enjoy, let me just say it from the get-go. I know I'm nitpicking. I'm going into cliche nerd mode where it's just like, I love it, but I'm only going to complain about it. But my feeling is it's a weird decision to me to have Kara's ultimate conclusion to her story in this particular interpretation be because I am not special and I can't stand and I can't stand up on my own. I don't have my own identity. All things which I've never felt watching this version of her character. For her to kind of be like, my place is in this completely alternate or this completely different future, disconnected from everybody. This place I've been for 5 seconds and suddenly it's like, oh, I belong here and I'm in love with this guy who I met 10 minutes ago. Again, I enjoyed it. I think it's interesting. I wish sort of more organically threaded through the other episodes and even just in her story, just a hint of dissatisfaction, because I think I really do like the interpretation of Kara that we will be seeing in this upcoming film. The idea that she's traumatized by this event. I don't think that's been touched on a lot in Supergirl, regardless of what interpretation there is. And I think it's a really cool way to differentiate her from Superman. So to have it come up in this series and at the very end, the most interesting idea about her, it's like, wait a second, we couldn't have done this so many episodes ago. It just feels like a missed opportunity. And then a very weird, to your point, like, why was this the conclusion to her story? Why did it have to be the ultimate ending to her story that she leaves and never comes back?
Yeah, and I don't mean to harp on this, but it's a big part of, if we're looking at an arc, it's the conclusion of it. So it's a big piece of this puzzle here, and it kind of breaks my heart a little bit because there's a part of me that's like, I think I would have just stopped with her in Panic in the Sky because she has this moment of triumph over Galatea, and it's like, good, because as far as what these couple of season 3 appearances accomplished, putting her in the traditional costume, which I don't know if that was a welcome thing for fans at the time, but and maybe even for myself at the time, it felt comfortable and familiar. But now I'm saying to myself, no, like, let's lean more into what made this version of the character stand out. Right. So the costume switch doesn't really do a lot for me. And then, yeah, this choice here and the way that it unfolds, like we're saying, it just left a lot to be desired. It's also funny to me because in that scene with Green Arrow and Superman, Superman says something about how proud he is of her, but he's like, don't tell her.
Like, right.
And I've made this joke before, but it so calls to mind the job fair episode of The Office where Michael makes this rude remark about Pam in front of Pam and she storms off. And then he says the sweetest things about her, about what a wonderful person and worker she is. And he's like, but I would never say it to her face. And Oscar is like, why? Why wouldn't you say it? And I felt the same way here.
And it's just it's such a left turn for Superman and for Kara. Like, why? Superman is the hero. He is the person who would constantly encourage and support and compliment somebody. You know, it just doesn't feel natural for who these characters are, even in this interpretation, for him to suddenly be like, yeah, I never told her how much I appreciate her. It's like, really? Never? Like, you're not like a completely different, like, dark or you're not a version of the character that we wouldn't expect to be that supportive person in her life. And so why are we suddenly deciding that that's how we feel? And you're never telling her, or you never told her, or I should have told her, maybe she would have stayed. It just felt like the pathos, you feel it, and it's an emotional episode and it's kind of sad. And I feel that sort of longing when he says it. But then, I think about it in retrospect and say, you didn't say that? That just doesn't seem like something this version of the character would do, really. Like, it feels like you're constantly telling her, and she never felt like she wasn't supported by you. So it does feel a little strange.
So a few things on this, because there is that moment where Superman says to Ollie, like, I've tried to make her feel at home. And Ollie's like, how? And in that moment, I do say to myself, there might be a little bit of validity to this, because in fairness, he doesn't bring her to the orphanage. Lucky for her, the Kents are alive here on the show. Otherwise, right to the orphanage for you. But he brings her to Jonathan and Martha. And they clearly fill the role of surrogate parents to her. And so he places her, I think, in the best possible environment that he could. But at the same time, I don't know that we see, I think there's a lot that we have to sort of fill in and assume, but I don't know that there's an awful lot that we really see between Clark and Kara to really show the ways in which he's really made her feel at home or made her feel like he's proud of her. So in that one moment, that retort from Ollie, that was an instance where I'm like, okay, this piece of it, there actually might be something here.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But otherwise, I do have a number of issues with this. It's also funny looking at echoes to other media adaptations and whatnot. We were talking off mic. I know you haven't made your way through all of Smallville, and I don't mean to spoil this for you, but
no, please, by all means.
But in one of
I hear he does become Superman at the end.
He makes it. He does make it.
I think I know that.
He does make it. But in the second to last episode, or the last episode before the 2-part finale, Kara does return because she had been off the board for a little while, but she returns, and essentially Jor-El tells her, you're not the star of the show. You need to leave, basically. Right? Like Clark.
And to hear that from Terrence Stamp, like that, how heartbreaking.
Yeah. But basically in the final season, it's Darkseid. It's the looming threat of Darkseid that Clark has to face, the darkness. And Jor-El essentially tells Kara that this is a challenge Kal-El must meet on his own without her help. And so her solution is to put on that Legion ring and depart for the future. And we do see her in the season 11 comics, which I don't really tend to focus on too much, but I know there's more to her story there. But it's one of those things, it felt not dissimilar from what we get here, where it just felt like a very abrupt end for the character. And I guess the one, not to be a Smallville apologist, but at the same time, from the show's perspective, they did, I think, need to get her off the board so that Clark could have his moment in the series finale. Now, the way in story, the way it plays is a bit clunky, but I understand why the show did it. But why I'm a little more baffled here in the animated series realm is like, why? Like we didn't need to write her off.
Yeah. Well, that brings up another question. And I don't know. I wonder if you know about this more than I do, but the fact that in two different versions of the character, we see Kara go off into the future with the Legion makes me wonder, is that something that is canonical, like some big major event in the comics that I'm just not aware of because I'm not as familiar with Supergirl? Like, is that something where they are honoring
Yes.
a version? Okay.
So yes. So a couple of things on that front. So number one, now we didn't really hit on this in our Silver and Bronze Age discussions when we were talking about Supergirl in the comics. There's a lot more to come on this podcast with respect to the Legion. We'll get there. But yeah, in those pre-crisis comics, she did have an affiliation with the Legion. To my knowledge, it was never to the extent that she full on left the present day permanently to go live in the future, but she did time travel and have adventures with them. So there was a historical connection between Supergirl and the Legion. But, and I was pulling this up on my phone just to check the dates because this popped into my head. And I think more than anything, this might help account for it. Otherwise, it was a huge coincidence. So the Far From Home episode aired April 2006. Over in the comics, in March 2006, we had Supergirl join the Legion of Superheroes, and they retitled the book Supergirl and the Legion of Superheroes. This was during the Mark Waid, Barry Kitson series, and the rebranding of the series happened post Infinite Crisis in the 1 year later landscape. So this tied in, intentional or not, and I have to imagine that it was, with exactly what was happening in the comics at the time. So that could very well be our answer for why they did this. Maybe it made sense at the time, but looking back at it now, not so
looking
much.
at it in isolation, it feels clunky. Let me ask you this, because I think maybe this is also something we're bumping up against, and I'm gonna put it out there. Do you think this episode, her final episode, would have been better if Superman had played a more major role and it had focused more on that relationship and that reconciliation?
Perfect. So this leads me to one of my other kind of big picture observations that runs through all of these appearances here, which is, and this cuts a couple of different ways. So I don't know exactly how I feel about it, but certainly Clark is the one who finds her in that first episode and brings her to the farm and doesn't want her to get involved with the new intergang that he's investigating, but she does. And then it turns out the intergang is a front for Granny Goodness and the Furies, and they're building this device that's going to draw a comet to the Earth to destroy the planet. And a battle ensues, and Superman ends up getting taken to Apocalypse, and she follows him and rescues him and all of that, right? In that initial two-parter, in addition to the business with Clark himself, she also has this little team up with Jimmy Olsen. And there's a really, really lovely parallel that the episodes draw between Clark trying to stop Kara from getting involved and Lois trying to stop Jimmy from getting involved. Right. And so the two of them link up and investigate, and because they find this token that one of the gang members dropped, and it leads them to an arcade, and then that leads them to Granny. Great. So it's like, oh, she might have something to do with Jimmy here, romantic or otherwise. They never interact again.
Never again. Yes. Right. So frustrating.
We have the Girls' Night Out episode from Batman the Animated Series where she meets Barbara Gordon, and they go up against this trio of villains who are teaming up. And it's funny, in rewatching it, I'm like, there are really only a couple of instances where we really delve into the characters. But what we do get, I thought, was impactful, this conversation between Kara and Barbara. Essentially, the grass is always greener on the other side sort of thing, where Kara sees Barbara's life in the city and everything that she's able to do, and she lives independently. And that's a big draw for Kara. But then Barbara's like, oh, you live on a farm with grass and animals. Like, that sounds amazing. Fresh air, that sounds amazing. So we have the forging of an equivalent of the world's finest pair. They never interact again.
I'm seeing a pattern emerge here.
We're seeing a pattern here. The longest standing relationship she has is with Oliver Queen. They both share that first mission in the first episode of JLU. He's part of the team along with the Question. They're investigating the business that will lead them to Galatea in Fearful Symmetry. Right. And he's one of the ones who gets pulled into the future in that last episode. So out of all of the characters in the DCAU, the one she has the strongest bond with is Green Arrow. So that's a long-winded way of answering your question. And I still don't really have a hard answer because there's a part of me that's like, it almost made more sense that it was Green Arrow with her in the future and that it wasn't Superman on that adventure because she seems to have more of a bond with Ollie. And then I say to myself, and I welcome your thoughts on this, because there's part of me that's like, well, look, at least we got to see her have these different dynamics, even if they didn't continue. Do you feel the same, or do you think, no, like we really should have drilled down on Jimmy or Batgirl or Superman himself and seen that play out more? Like, where do you land?
I would have loved to see it. And I understand, look, the show is Superman. It was not Supergirl. It's the Justice League, not Supergirl and the Justice League. So I get it. But these are all, they were such great interactions and offered so many possibilities for stories we could have seen, for directions the character could have gone in. Ultimately, to your point, I would have loved to have seen her end up with Jimmy Olsen versus Brainiac 5. Although I really think the relationship between her and Brainiac 5 is sweet. I like it. It just feels very abrupt to have it end just have her character end the way she does. And then when it's I'm going to stay here for this boy again, who I've known for a day at most. I'm going to abandon my entire life, my family and friends for this person. I know that's not the only reason, but it is a silly reason. It is silly that that's part of her reason. The Barbara Gordon episode, man, I wish we'd gotten more team ups between the two of them, but it's the Batman Superman adventures, not the Batgirl Supergirl adventures. But it just goes to show there's so much richness to this supporting cast, and there's so much you could have done. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. I understand. Yes, I would have loved more. I understand why we didn't get more. That said, I think this final episode, yes, you're right. Green Arrow has more of an impact in who she is, especially in JLU. And really, ultimately, more than Superman does in the entirety of the animated series, sadly. And I really think the primary weakness of this episode is that Superman didn't play a more active role, that he's sitting, watching on a monitor, saying things like, yeah, I should have been there for her more. And it's well, this could have been the episode, buddy. This could have been that moment where you and her get your reconciliation. You give her your blessing to send her off. I think maybe that's what it feels off to me. It doesn't sit well with me that Superman is just sort of I was never there for her. And well, I guess, I'll never get to tell her. It's it's bittersweet, and it's okay to have these characters end up in moments that aren't perfect, that aren't entirely happy. I'm all up for that. But for this relationship, for these two characters, the last two survivors of these planets, it just feels very wrong to me that we didn't get Superman more involved, more active, and more of a farewell between them. It just, I think, it's the note beneath the note of this entire episode.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, tying it back to what we were saying before about the origin that they use for the character here. It's the fact that they're like cousins and not technically cousins, sure, that's not an insurmountable hurdle. You can still show them forge a very deep familial-esque relationship.
You could have had any moment where she says, we're not related by blood, but I've always seen you as my brother, or, right. Something like that. And we don't get that moment. That's
the thing. Yeah. So it's the origin that we can work with that, but it's what we see here where it leaves something to be desired. And yeah, the fact that romance is even part of the reason, and not a small part, it seems, for why she wants to stay, that felt odd because it's not that was something she really had pursued in any of the prior appearances. So that really felt out of left field. And then the fact that you have Ollie saying to Brainiac 5, you're in love with her, aren't you? 2 seconds after Brainiac 5 and Supergirl met, insane. And thankfully, Brainiac 5 does acknowledge that, the fact that they just met. But still, they jump to love and this deep connection that's going to be at least a part of why she leaves her home. Yeah, it's one of these things I think you just needed one more episode. It's if there had been an episode earlier in the season where you set this up, where they have an initial encounter, then they part, and then they reunite, I think that solves a lot of the problems. But this was way too much to try to accomplish in simply one episode. We love digging into epic comic book runs, but what about the art of the single issue? Single Bound is a podcast series hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics, many of them starring the Man of Steel, Logan's favorite character. Listen and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow the show on Instagram @SingleBoundPodcast. Step into the refraction with Drunken Avenger #1, The Volunteer, an indie comic by Rick Reason that turns the tropes upside down. 4 men died in 9 seconds. John Stevens survived. But survival has a price. Now, the government calls him a variable. The media calls him the drunken Avenger. And the city of Meridian is caught in the crossfire between civil liberty and national security. Follow @Drunken Avenger on social media for project updates and previews. My comic shop closed over a decade ago, but if there's one place where I feel that same sense of camaraderie, it's Fat Moose Comics, New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store, led by current owner Sean Hendricks. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany, New Jersey, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Ever wonder what would happen if a person who knew barely anything about comics decided to absorb hundreds of Superman stories from all eras and media? That's exactly what Robbo is doing on This Podcast Will Never Die, which starts with all the ways the Man of Steel stood out on the newsstands in 1938. Listen and subscribe to This Podcast Will Never Die, and you'll never look at Superman's trunks the same way again. So we've hit on a lot already, but I want to just kind of drill down on the individual episodes a little bit more, just with some things that stood out to us. So in Little Girl Lost, the opening, so reminiscent of the cut opening to Superman Returns.
Yes.
There he is in a spaceship exploring the ruins of Krypton and its solar system. It's like, was this the inspiration? But it was so funny.
Yeah, I love that. And, in Superman Returns, it's a great deleted scene. I think some people would argue for it being back in the movie. I am not one of them. That's a very slow movie, and that is a very slow opening scene. But I love the idea I've always loved the idea of Clark. It's like, well, yeah, why doesn't he go back? Why doesn't he take a look and see what he can recover and learn from the remnants of Krypton? And I love that kind of loneliness. It kind of it reminds us, like, yep, I really am the last survivor. Oh, wait, hold on. What's this? I love that. And I love what those possibilities, like what that suggests. Like, it means that Superman does have somebody he can connect to. Again, not to jump back to the final episode again, but why it makes it so frustrating that we don't get enough of this relationship. But I love the idea when Superman is out there desperately hoping for something to connect with.
That's, it's funny because I know we're hitting on the ways in which maybe these episodes didn't deliver everything that we wanted. Yet overall, clearly we do find this to be a very winning take on the character. But I believe that there's validity to what we're saying because, throughout these subsequent appearances, unless I'm just totally blanking on something, I don't feel like you ever really see an instance of him recognizing or articulating this tangible connection to not exactly his home, but as close to his biological home as he's going to get.
Yeah.
You just don't really see that. And it is all the more odd because we're never given an explanation for why he's out there. We're kind of filling this in, right? Like in Superman Returns, there's this whole idea that Lex had planted a story or something like that made it seem like life was still out there.
By the way, that's not in the movie. I think it's in the novelization and maybe a deleted scene. So they didn't even use that. It's such I love that idea that Lex is the one who planted the story.
Yeah. But here, while we're not given an explanation, you can reasonably assume that there was some curiosity on his part, whether or not he was expecting to find anyone or anything, but some curiosity to retrace the flight path and see what's there. So the fact that doesn't seem to lead to anything deeper in terms of what he's found is a little odd given the setup.
This, with all due respect to Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, this entire incredible team behind these amazing shows, I think this speaks to what Mike Carlin was saying, which is like, these guys just weren't that interested in Superman. The reason he's out there, because the plot needs him to find Supergirl.
Right.
It's a Supergirl, and I think what you see in terms of depth and development in the comics, which were written by different people for the most part, it just isn't as evident in the animated series because maybe the interest in exploring those ideas and themes just wasn't there. I don't want to speak for them because this is a team of creatives I respect so much and I love what they've done. But I think maybe that's part of it, is it's just kind of like, we weren't really thinking about it because we weren't as interested in Superman's psyche and like that stuff.
Right. But it's still a testament to what they were able to achieve, that I think the characterization for Kara was so on point.
Yeah.
And she was so endearing that we still gravitate towards this version. So I think the character was able to transcend some of the limitations of the story and these relationships, or the lack of development of some of these relationships.
Yeah, definitely.
But yes, and I'm not going to go through all the beats of this, but just sort of the things that really stood out to me. So when he discovers the ruins of Argo, he does find this hollow message from Kara's mother, who explains that when Krypton exploded, the shockwaves ravaged Argo and knocked the planet from its orbit. And then the planet plunged into cold and darkness. And eventually she was able to place these few remaining survivors in these cryo chambers. And Superman goes to investigate, and 3 out of the 4 have been destroyed. Their occupants expired. But we see there's one survivor, Kara. And so we get this shot of her inside the chamber. And then we cut right to her flying, basking in the sun in Kansas. It's a great moment, soaring literally and figuratively. The music's awesome. But this is where that Superman Adventures number 21 was so critical, because it fills in so much. I mean, when you just watch these episodes, and Little Girl Lost in particular, it's like, she's just good.
Yeah.
She's good. Fine. Like, she's fine.
Yeah.
There's not even any talk of her, of her lost relatives or anything like that. Right. I mean, I think in the second part, when she's on Apocalypse and she's fighting the Furies, I think it's there. Some of this might be blurring together, but I think it's there where she has a line about, like, I'm not going to let another world be destroyed.
Exactly. Yes. So there's a hint, like there is, she recognizes the trauma she's been through. She recognizes what she's lost, but because of her kind of carefree, she's a young kid, she's having fun, that vibe. I remember thinking, watching through this, I was like, well, that's going to be a big note for me, is like, is she okay? Like, what happened to that trauma? And that's why I appreciated that story so much in Superman Adventures, where it's like, oh, this is great. And once again, just speaks to how wonderful those stories are. And again, DC, put it on DC Infinite, please.
Yeah. I mean, I would really say, as I know we have audience members who I'm sure are well-versed in the comic, in the Superman Adventures comic, but I'm sure there are plenty of folks who have watched some or all of these episodes, but have never read the comics. And if you have an interest in Kara in Z, make sure at a minimum that you read Superman Adventures 21, because, and it's an extra sized issue. I mean, it really digs into the character and the backstory. You get to see there the final days of Argo, and even leading up to it, because you find out Kara's got a friend on Krypton and they video chat with each other.
Yeah.
And the girl calls her and she's like, oh, my parents are worried. They're on the science council. There's this talk, something bad might happen to Krypton. And then it happens. And we see the effects of this wave. And Kara is there in the observatory with her mother, her uncle, and her cousin. And the rest of their family members are lost in this. And then we see the world as it plunges into that cold and darkness. And ultimately we see her mother resorting to putting them into these chambers with the hope that maybe one day someone will find their distress beacon and rescue them.
Well, it's heartbreaking too, because we know that's not the case. And her mom is basically like, I promise you're going to see the sun again. But we know, like, it's like that's kind of an empty promise, because we don't know what's going to happen. And we also know everyone else dies. And you get there's so much richness in this story. And I so appreciate they took the time to tell her story and flesh it out. And even if it's not in the series itself, I'm glad there is a form that did tell that story. It's really, really lovely and affecting.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And even in that issue, you find out her father was an astrophysicist, and this was an interest she shared. I mean, not to keep beating up on Far From Home, but that's also the first time in these episodes where she says anything science related. Like all of a sudden she's talking to Brainiac 5 about a scientific solution to their problem, because they're going up against the Fatal Five and members of the Legion have been captured and they're trying to track them. But it's just like, where has this been? But
and a story should never rely on like, well, if you read the comic book, then it's like, no, every story should stand on its own. They should all enrich each other. Like, you should read the comic and be like, oh, this gives me some texture and color that I didn't know. I completely agree with you. I think it's the frustration of like, these stories would have been really good if they'd actually been incorporated
Yeah,
some
but
way.
texture. I think that's the perfect word. I feel
Yeah.
like that's really what you get with that comic book story in particular. Now, in fairness to Little Girl Lost, we're not told how much time passes between him finding her chamber on Argo
Right.
and basking in the sun flying in Kansas. So, and I think that's what the comic then kind of fills in.
Yes. And
Wish it
the
had,
animated series, like the Superman show in particular, was like very high flying adventure. It was not dark and moody like Batman. They really put effort into differentiating Superman from Batman in that way. So I get it. We just want to have fun. Yes, there's some dark stuff in the Superman series, like the dark side stuff, like Apocalypse and things like that. But for the most part, I get it. Like, let's not spend some time like reliving these harrowing details. And we already did Superman's origin, which is Krypton exploding and that sadness and stuff. Yeah, we don't need to do it again with Argo. I get it. I understand.
yeah, there's an efficiency to it, in fairness.
Yes.
But whereas in the comic, or whereas in the show, she's flying, she seems pretty well adjusted. In the comic, yeah, you find out that she's having all of these nightmares.
Yeah.
About the final days on Argo, and that she has this fear, this aversion to the cold. She refuses Superman's invitations to visit the fortress because she doesn't want to go to the Arctic. But that's another instance in the comic where it's like, hey, he's inviting her to the fortress. That's great. That's a great bit.
Yeah. Yes. It would have been, and she has to, the arc, I can't sing the praises of the series enough, but like her whole arc is like overcoming those fears, finally going to the fortress because she has to save Superman. She has to save the day. Like, it's so good, and she's able to overcome those fears. But like, none of this is touched on in the animated series. None of that trauma, none of that fearfulness, none of that like, I overcame these things to become the great hero that I am today. Like, you can't help but sort of mourn the fact that was not there wasn't more connection between what they were doing in the comics and what they were doing with the animated series.
And I hear what you're saying when you talk about that conversation you had with Mike Carlin and kind of what he shared about where the interest really lied from the writers of these various animated shows, because you look at Batman the animated series and there were episodes there that really delved into the psychology of why Bruce does what he does, and you don't really get that equivalent on the Superman side. But in any event, I mean, Little Girl Lost, still a lot of fun.
Yes.
And nice little nods. I mean, when she disobeys Clark's orders and shows up at the Deadly Planet, she's wearing glasses and a brown wig.
Yep, love it.
Right out of the classic comics when she had her disguise as Linda Danvers. I mean, it's once again talking about these echoes and parallels. Clark here, not as harsh as Silver Age Superman, sticking her at the orphanage, telling her to keep her existence a secret, but not worlds apart either. No. He is fairly strict. I mean, it definitely had that feel to it of, I've not told you you're ready to do this yet.
Yeah, which is great. But it's like, it's great for the story and it's great for her. And instead of just being like, you're right, she has her own personality and her own character. And I love, again, bummed we didn't get to see more of it, but I just love the dynamic between her and Jimmy. That relationship is really, really fun. I kind of put that, again, as a lost opportunity because I see her and Jimmy with a potential romance as a really fun thing to explore.
Yeah, and I guess my last tie between Little Girl Lost and the comic is that, like we said, here ultimately on the show, they go up against Granny Goodness and the Furies. And then in the comic, you see Granny plotting her revenge against Kara for all of this. She sends Kanto at first, who tries to use kryptonite. Now, in the comic, Supergirl is immune to kryptonite, which is not the case on the show, so a little bit of a discrepancy there. But when that fails, she resorts to the Phantom Zone and pulls out this mystery Kryptonian, or not Kryptonian, villain who turns out to be Zod, the Butcher of Argo. So he's from Argo in Superman Adventures.
These insane story, like, and first General Zod just showing up at all is like, oh my God, wow, okay. But like, again,
and he's not Kryptonian, like it works. We don't, right?
Well, I love these. They do such great twists on the mythos and the things that we've become so familiar with. And it does make you feel like, man, how many people are missing out because it's like, oh, it's just the Superman Adventures comics. It's probably just like throwaway episodes of the series that they weren't good enough. And it's like, that's not the case at all. I would argue that the Superman Adventures, as much as I love the animated series, are better stories and better characters than the animated show. And there's so many great crowd pleasing, fan pleasing moments that it's like, why didn't we get these in like the series that everyone is watching? It feels like they kind of have been buried and they're hidden gems. And I can't encourage people enough to find those gems because it's so worth it.
I mean, I guess I'm in that category you're talking about. Like, I kind of put this off for years
Well, me
because
too.
I was like, well, the shows that, and I mean, honestly, I still kind of feel that way about Smallville and Smallville season 11, although I have read all of those. And I know some fans like really stand by them, and I didn't hate them or anything, but in my mind, it's just like the show is the show. But with Superman, and I guess maybe a distinction with season 11, it's just carrying the story past what we had seen. Whereas
Right.
here with Superman Adventures, we really are filling in a lot of those nuances, and it's very welcome. And also in that issue 21, there's a reference to Kara making friends at high school with Susan Ross, younger sister of Pete. It's like justice for Pete. We even get a Ross family member here. And there too, she's struggling with how simplistic the science is that she's learning in school. So that issue in particular, like really just rounds out a lot that you don't necessarily get here. I think most of the rest of this we talked about as far as this team up with Jimmy, the investigation, Intergang, Granny, the Furies. Anything else you want to say before I move on to Unity?
No, it's a great two-parter. I know I'm kind of beating up and singing the praises of the comic series, but I love the animated series. I think this is so much fun, and I love this interpretation of her. I think it's a really, really great way to introduce Supergirl to this universe.
So Unity, sad to say, one of my least favorite episodes of Superman the Animated Series. I love
so many people feel this way about it.
I mean, I love that Supergirl and Smallville get the spotlight. And I like the beginning part of this where she's really yearning to get out of Smallville because it's a small town and she wants to have some fun, and she's embarking on spring break and she goes to Metropolis. And we do get this great montage and we see photos of things she's been doing with Clark and Lois. And this, it's like, I would have loved for that to have just been the episode. But then when she returns, it turns out this alien creature has taken control of the townspeople, and it's sort of this hive mind situation. And
right.
I don't know, the tentacles are connected to them. I don't know. This just did not really work for me.
I love this episode.
Oh, good,
and I was actually,
good.
I was kind of surprised when I would go through and watch them and I would go on IMDb and seeing the rating so low, I was like, wow, I didn't realize I was in the minority here. But I think, I'm a massive fan of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, particularly Donald Sutherland, the one with him. Like, it's so good. The 70s one with him, Leonard Nimoy, Jeff Goldblum. I just love that concept. I love anything that's kind of quasi religious cult, quasi like people are brainwashed. So all of that stuff I really, really love. At the time when I first saw this, I was not a big horror fan. As a kid, I'm not into horror. I'm a massive horror fan now. And I think maybe the seeds of that came from this episode, because I love, as a different flavor to the Superman series, the animated series, I was like, this is a very strange outlier in this entire series. We don't have a straight horror story. It's icky and weird and kind of gross and off-putting. And I sort of love that. Like, what are these aliens? Where did they come from? We never hear of them again. What was their motivation? Just to take over Smallville. But you know what? I love kind of the cosmic horror vibe. I love the creepiness and ickiness of it. It feels very graphic for a children's television show. Like, just the tentacles in everyone's mouths, and like the grossness of the guy like having this belly. Like, I just remember as a kid feeling like, am I allowed to watch this? I'm not allowed to watch X-Files, but I can get away with this because it's Superman. And I love that it's a Kara-centric episode, that she really gets the spotlight in this too. Like, she has to figure it out on her own. Superman is around, but like, he's not as directly involved in saving the day, that she really does get to be the champion in this one. So I always liked that as well. And I like that it's like, it feels like a really creepy, genuine threat. It's not just like, oh, Supergirl has to take on a knockoff villain. It's like this very disturbing, creepy villain that she ends up defeating. I always like that. But I find it fascinating, the divisive reaction and the fan reaction to it, because I I think I can see and understand why people are like, yeah, not a fan. But I think it just scratches that horror itch for me. And combining that with Supergirl was just a really, really fun treat for me.
Good. Look, I say this all the time, and I'll say it again now. When I don't love something, nothing makes me happier than to hear that someone else got a lot more out of it. No, honestly, like that's great. Like I'm glad that you enjoyed it so much. I guess I'm open to the idea of it. And I think that maybe if it had leaned even more into the horror or had gone more in an absurd direction, maybe that would have worked for me. I think the biggest thing though is that we get the lay of the land so fast. It's like she goes home, something's a little off with Jonathan and Martha. They put her in the truck, they go right to this tent, and we have our alien creature with the tentacles. And I think maybe if they had let that play out a bit longer about people acting a little bit off and it was a little bit more of a mystery, I think that actually might have gone a long way for me. So yeah, I'm not opposed to it totally. I think just the way it played out, I think would have made a big difference for me.
No, that's a very fair point. I think that would have definitely made it more effective.
And then Legacy, this 2-part finale. I mean, not a ton of play for Supergirl, but I'm so glad she was present here. I mean, it's one of those things, not that the show had to justify introducing her, right? We could have just had the little girl lost 2-parter and never saw her again. And we wouldn't be doing an episode here necessarily, but we'd be like, okay, they did her on the show and then that was it. But I feel like Legacy is a perfect use of her. And it's like, if she is in this world, well, if Superman's missing for a month, yeah, she would fill in. And I feel like that was very much in keeping with those pre-crisis stories when Superman wasn't there, or in something,
the Clark Kent robot, the Superman, just very, very Silver Age stuff.
Yeah. Or something like Superman 149, the original death of Superman, the imaginary story where he's full on killed and then she takes over, she fills in.
Right.
But here she's doing it with these robots, and it's very humorous, where she's operating the Clark robot as he's going to eat a hot dog and all this stuff. And she's falling asleep and the robots are malfunctioning, and that ends up being the work of Lex. So we actually end up getting, I think, a pretty cool confrontation scene between Lex and Supergirl, where Lex now realizes, oh, Superman's not here. This is a robot. Like, you can't keep this up. And she's really determined and stands her ground in the face of Lex, which was great. I'm glad that they at least had some interaction over the course of all of these episodes. And thankfully it wasn't a romantic one, Matrix. Damn it. Obviously that would have been even grosser here because of the age, but still.
Another wise departure from the comics of the time.
Yeah. And then of course, when the brainwashed Superman leads the Apocalypse invasion force, Supergirl is the one who's trying to get through, and Superman does make quick work of her. She's not able to prevail physically over him, but then the military deploys that kryptonite gas missile and knocks the both of them out. And then thanks to the help of Lois, both Superman and Supergirl are able to make an escape at that military compound, but she gets shot. And that's where Superman brings her to Star Labs and the care of Professor Hamilton, who initially is reluctant to treat her because they're wanted by the government at this point. And this is the moment when Superman grabs Hamilton and demands that he treat Supergirl, and that moment, and then the subsequent moment where you just get that tight shot on Hamilton's face, like that's the seed that will become the Cadmus storyline, right? That fear, that moment that Hamilton experiences. So really, really critical setup for what will come. And obviously this is the moment where Hamilton obtains the genetic material that will give rise to Galatea down the line in Justice League Unlimited. But probably my favorite moment for her in Legacy is at the very end, where Superman has defeated Darkseid. And this is one of the best. I mean, that's one of the things I'm always struck by in rewatching these episodes. Like, man, they went hard on these fights.
Yeah. When Darkseid is just like completely, his head's like not falling apart, but he's all like and he walks up to Superman and is still like trying to, like, can't even lift his arms, but like, is just desperate to put an end to Superman. It's so good. But then you're like, man, I can't believe this was a kid show. Like, I just can't believe they aired this on Saturday morning. I mean, it's incredible.
It's amazing.
We were like, how blessed were we?
Well, even more so because I don't know about you, but I mean, I watched Spider-Man, the animated series in the 90s on Fox.
Oh, yeah.
And there, notoriously, standards and practices was like all over them, and they couldn't throw punches in that show. So it was a ton of throws and flips and pushes. And then I'm watching these episodes and they're like really just trading blows.
Blood and like disheveled and beat up. Yep.
Yeah, it's amazing. And in this battle between Superman and Darkseid goes to use the Omega beams and Superman covers the beams with his hands, and it just demolishes this guy's head.
Yep.
That leads to that moment that you said. And then Superman throws Darkseid's still alive, but defeated.
There's a moment where you're like, wait a second, is he dead?
Still alive, but defeated body down to the people. And it's such a standout moment where these beaten down people of Apocalypse cater to Darkseid, care for him. They lift him up, they carry him. And it's such a shock for Superman. But this is where Kara enters the picture. It really looks like Superman. He's ready to go finish the job.
Yeah.
And Supergirl stops him. And I felt like that was a really impactful moment. And I'm glad they gave her that moment, because man, otherwise, other than the business with the robots, it's like her role really would have been to get shot with kryptonite and then blasted again. Right.
Yeah.
So this was, I thought, a really, really important moment for her to talk him down in that moment.
Yes, to pull him back. And, it is kind of like, I think they realized the dynamic between Superman and Supergirl wasn't that dissimilar from Batman and Robin. But I love that. I don't see it as like, oh, they didn't have any new ideas. I think that dynamic works perfectly. And especially because Superman, we see him as so stoic and infallible, like in a moment where he is showing like his humanity and his anger, for her to kind of like, she's the protege. She's learned from him, and he's quote unquote raised her on Earth to be a good, upstanding person and to help people. For her to then be, the roles have switched, and now she's the one kind of teaching him and like reminding him, like, this is not, you got to come back.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, talk about an arc, even just in Superman, the animated series, to go from the beginning of like, no, just stay on the farm, don't interfere with Intergang, to no, she's rightfully so inserting herself in this moment at a really critical juncture and stopping him from doing something that he will almost certainly regret. So,
yeah. And even also the moment where like she is injured and being carried past him, and she's like, you got a lot of explaining to do. Like, it's not a like, I'm so glad you're back. I remember even as a kid thinking like, don't be so hard. He was brainwashed. But like, just again, to have her kind of like allow herself to feel that anger and frustration and to not let him off the hook, I think is really powerful and such a great representation of her character and who she is in this version.
Absolutely. I think I said everything that I really had about Girls Night Out. Anything else on that front that you want to say?
It's such a fun episode, and I wish we'd maybe gotten one more with her and Batgirl, and maybe even like her and Robin and Batgirl, and like throw Jimmy Olsen into the mix. Like,
oh my God, that would have been so
it would have been so
good.
much fun. Yeah. I wish it's one of those moments where it's like, I'm glad we got it at all, but also, as we've discussed, it would have been really, really nice to get maybe one more episode.
Oh, a Jimmy, Kara, Tim, Barbara, or Dick and Barbara. Yeah. Like, oh, that would
Jimmy
have been so
just
fun.
Completely out of his element, but being a part of that team would be so good.
Well, here's the thing. I think tying a lot of this together, I mean, not that it's an absolute rule, but this idea of one more beat of something, I really think goes a long way towards just tying things together and making it feel fuller, as opposed to, oh yeah, there's this one-off adventure with Batgirl. Yeah, we know Supergirl and Batgirl, they have a whole thing, but it's like, oh, okay, but that's all we get to see of it. You play that one more time, and then you get something like what we see in Justice League Unlimited, where you really look at this older brother, younger sister, or mentor, mentee. I don't know exactly what we want to describe it, but between her and Green Arrow, like it becomes a thing because we have these few instances, and it's not like, oh yeah, every episode, but a few times across 3 seasons, it then it becomes an arc.
Right.
So, but yeah, the Girls Night Out, definitely a ton of fun. And then Justice League, again, I think a lot of this we've already hit on, but I guess the main thing is, what did you make of Galatea, this clone?
Just the way they set it up, and she's having these nightmares, and it's like, what's going on? And then you find out she's kind of been like betrayed in this really significant way, and that she ends up having to clean up the mess that was made as a result, I thought was fantastic. And it's a really, really cool idea. And the way they're able to reference characters like Power Girl without being completely beholden to them, and use it as a means to tell Supergirl's story, but also to tell this Cadmus story.
I don't know if we have any hardcore Power Girl fans who are listening. I would really actually welcome your input, because I don't know how this would sit with someone who really loves Power Girl, if they would feel like she's been co-opted into being this evil older clone. But for my purposes, I thought it worked really well. I mean, for those of us who have followed her in the comics, we know she's had a very long and convoluted journey, right? Initially introduced pre-Crisis as the Kara Zor-El, just L, of Earth 2. And then post-Crisis, she had all of these different origins that were presented. And then it wasn't until that JSA Classified arc right before Infinite Crisis by Jeff Johns and Amanda Connor, where we really kind of sorted everything out and restored that traditional origin that she's the Supergirl of Earth 2.
Yeah, gotcha. Because I'm not as familiar with Power Girl, and I know she is an alternate version, alternate universe version. So I liked. I'm not married to any interpretation of her. So in this case, I watched this and I'm like, oh, she's a clone in this version. This is kind of cool to see sort of the dynamic and what that means for Supergirl's character. But you bring up a good point. It is something where I can see fans of Power Girl being like, she's kind of giving short shrift.
Yeah. So if for anyone who feels that way, like, I do get it. I didn't share that objection. To me, I thought this worked just fine. And to my knowledge, once that Jeff Johns reworking of the origin was in place around Infinite Crisis, I think that has been her origin consistently in the comics since. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding. But I thought in a meta sense, it was really kind of brilliant to spin Power Girl this way. And look, they never call her Power Girl, but she clearly has the look, although they don't give her the cape. But there is one of the episodes, she has a red towel and she puts it over her shoulder, and it's as close as we get. But it's one of these things where it's like, yeah, you do have Power Girl and Supergirl, only two versions of the same character, and to then reimagine one of them as a literal clone, right? And this older evil version of Supergirl, to put them in opposition to each other and to show Supergirl kind of, this dark potential version of herself, I thought really interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I thought it
I love
really
that.
well.
I think it's really cool. And again, like it serves Supergirl's story in a way that I think it makes it easier to forgive the departures from the character. For someone like me who is not super involved or invested in Power Girl, like, it doesn't, I have no connection there, but I think it works. It's cool to see a version of that character involved at all in this universe. And it's fun because it's done in a really interesting way for Kara. Yeah.
And at the outset of this, Kara's having these dreams that are playing out linearly, and they feel very real, but they're not actual memories. And then it turns out, yes, there's this psychic connection between the two of them, and they have their showdown. And at the end of that first episode, The Fearful Symmetry, she's talking to Hamilton because her investigation had led her to Star Labs, and now there's this reality of a clone of her. And she asks Hamilton, because she's like, well, the DNA would have to come from somewhere. He's like, no, we destroyed everything right away. But I think it's in that episode, right, where you find out, no, he is lying to her. Yeah, we find out right then and there.
And that was shocking to me too, because I am so used to, like, oh, the sweet, like, scientist who is an ally to Superman. So to have Hamilton basically as a villain in JLU was like, oh, interesting. This is a whole new dynamic.
Well, if there's a certain Adventures of Superman arc you might read at some point, you feel
okay, all right,
this will come back around. But yeah, so I mean, I thought. And it takes a while. It's not until one of these later episodes where Superman now has put the pieces together and reveals to Supergirl that Hamilton had betrayed her. And that's a tough moment. But so you just to even have a beat like that, where it's like, oh, okay, now we're getting a little payoff to this earlier setup with Hamilton, was great. And then, in Panic in the Sky, when Galatea has recovered from the initial battle and is deployed once again, this time to the Watchtower to destroy the Watchtower. And she puts the beat down on Steel. I didn't love that. I didn't love that for Steel. She really thrashes him. But then, Supergirl and Galatea, they have their rematch. And once again, you talk about a battle that goes hard. I mean, they're really throwing down.
It's great. And it's like, again, like, kudos to this team, this animation team for going all out and being willing to go there. And it's awesome too, because I'm so used to watching Batman and Superman, and the frame is in full frame, and to have this widescreen, just like the full canvas, it feels that much more epic. So to have these big epic battles and these fist fights, and to have them go as hard as they do, it's very, very enjoyable to watch.
Yeah. And Supergirl really gets under Galatea's skin by calling out the fact that she's a clone.
And that was kind of dark too. I was like, is she going to be like, I didn't really mean that. I was just trying to get, it's like, it's basically like you're worthless and you have nothing and you are nothing. I was like, okay, we're going there. All right.
Yeah. And then she pulls out one of those power conduits and fries her. Just fries Galatea. I mean, she's still breathing, but she's like burnt to a crisp.
Yeah, I was again. The show it pushes boundaries and it felt like JLU was maybe more of an acknowledgement and embracing of the fact that it was geared not specifically towards adults, but it definitely felt a bit more mature. Like
yes.
it accepted, like, you know what, maybe our primary audience, the demographic actually is more adult oriented than kids. So it definitely, it feels like that. The series and some of the humor, like when Ollie sees Galatea for the first time and says, she's a much more mature version of you, and you know exactly what he's talking about. I remember thinking like, oh, okay, I guess they'd accepted that their audience skewed older than the Batman and Superman shows.
And I guess I'll tip my hat one more time to Nicole Tom, because obviously she does the voice of Galatea as well, and she differentiates the two characters. You do feel the more youthful innocence of Supergirl and that more hardened edge of Galatea. So yeah,
there was a moment where I was like, is it the same actress? Like and like it is. Yeah. And to your point, like kudos to her.
Yeah. My last observation, I almost forgot this, but I'm glad I didn't. So they never make a point of this, but it's clear that chronologically Kara In-Z is older than Kal-El, because when Krypton explodes, Kal-El's a baby and she's a teen, right?
Right.
So they never make a point of this, but it's like in a way, it's a precursor to what we would get in the comics just a few years later. This whole new spin on the origin that Kara Zor-El in that instance is older and was meant to arrive on Earth at the same time and care for her baby cousin.
Right.
I don't know that this was necessarily a direct inspiration in any way, especially since they never talk about it. But I just wanted to note, it's like, yeah, this is an instance where you have a Supergirl who, yeah, she is chronologically older.
Yes. Yeah. No, that it is nice to get that.
Is there anything else you want to talk about that we haven't talked about?
No, I think I love this interpretation, and I think, you know, I haven't watched the CW show. I think that skews a little bit more towards like, oh, she's like sweet and kind of like very similar to Clark in terms of her vibe and personality. I really like Melissa Benoist. What I've seen of the show, I really like. But to me, I really, really, I lean towards this version because I like the idea of her being sort of a kid sister, a little more immature, a little more rebellious, and somebody who needs to kind of be led in the right direction by someone like Superman. And I think it's unfortunate that the last episode has so much character development and ideas and things that would have been better to see baked into some of the story that that led us to that point. But I think I prefer the version of Kara where she has obviously her own personality, but also is a little traumatized by the events, as she should be, of her childhood. And I appreciate that the film and Woman of Tomorrow kind of are leaning in that direction. The film is even more extreme in its interpretation of how she handles it. And I'm sure we'll see some growth there. That's really exciting. But to me, it's like, you've got to give Supergirl an angle and make her, she can't just be like, oh, she's just Superman, but a girl. And I think this version really, really accomplished that. And in a way that was exciting and didn't betray the roots and brought kind of the best all of the best ideas from some of the other interpretations we'd seen through the many, many years, and kind of combined it into a version that stands out to me as one of the best and in a way kind of a definitive version of this character. So that's my read on the DCAU Kara. And I think it still holds up, and I still think I look at this version fondly and is probably my preferred version of the character.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and that's definitely been a theme in these discussions that I do like for the character of Supergirl, whichever version we're talking about, to feel distinct, to have her own angle, and I like to see that manifest in different ways. You put her on a college campus, not
Right.
as a reporter at Catco Media, or or making Midvale really feel like a fleshed out place, like we're seeing in the current Sophie Campbell series. Like, there are various ways to do this. And I think when we look at the DCAU, I think when you look at the episodes in tandem with the comics, with the Superman Adventures comics, it really, really comes together in terms of that rebellious kid sister feel, which is quite distinct to this version, but also with the trauma that you would reasonably expect this character to have. So I think that gives you a very well-rounded version. I think if you're just looking at the show, still that rebellious kid sister streak, I think that worked. Oh, streak. By the way, we did get streaky in these episodes as well.
We did
not
get
super
streaky,
powered, but we did have streaky.
Yes.
But yeah, man, I think this works. And it's funny. We just did as of this recording, I just put out our Matrix Supergirl episode. And, I heard from a lot of people who really were not that familiar with that version of the character. And I imagine I'll probably hear something similar when we get into the Peter David Earthborn Angel stuff.
Yeah.
All to say that, like, for this period of time, for the 90s, it's like, yes, if you were a hardcore DC Comics reader, yes, you knew Matrix, you knew Earthborn Angel, more or less. But I feel for the general audience, certainly, I mean, this was the Supergirl. And I'm proud that this is the Supergirl we had, because I think this was a winning take. And the look, at least, would bleed into the comics later on, the last couple of years of the Peter David series, after the Earthborn entity is separated and it's just a relatively depowered Linda Danvers. She adopts this look. So It would live on, but just for those couple of years. And then that was really it. And to kind of bring this home, it's like I look at this version of the character, and like I said at the top, definitely connections that we can draw and have drawn to other Supergirls. But at the same time, this does feel very, very singular to me.
Yeah.
And really standing apart as its own iteration of Supergirl.
Yeah. It was such a strong interpretation that it was, talking about the different versions, the Matrix version and not Sterling Gates, the Peter David version. I look at those and I'm like, wow, we really went there. Why? And part of the reason I say why is because I look at this animated version and I'm like, well, why? Not every interpretation was this. It's almost like telling me that the different versions of Superman were, there was a Matrix version of Superman where he was just it's that baffling to me, where I'm like, well, this animated version just feels so, like you said, it's singular, it's definitive, and it feels like the best version of the character because she has her own personality, she has her own vibe, but she's also, we talk about her being kind of a punk kid, but she's got a good heart. So it's like all the best things that I think about when I think of what I want Supergirl to be, they're all right here. And I'm, like you said, I'm so glad we got this instead of Blob version or some other weird, convoluted, strange interpretation. It just feels so pure and so right. And I think it is. Like, again, I'm shocked when I go through the comics and say like, oh, it wasn't always, she was just Superman's cousin. There were different versions of it, because it just works so well when you watch this or you read the Superman Adventures interpretation of it.
Yeah, you feel her youth. I mean, even at the very end when she's 21, you still feel the youth. And once again, I think that's a key way to differentiate.
Throwing your life and your family away for a boy you just met, that makes sense. That's that for me as a 21-year-old, I probably would have done that for a girl I liked as well. So, hey, they got it right.
The last thing, and then I'll ask you to plug your podcast, but it just makes me laugh because it's like, you look at the post-crisis comics. And look, as I've said, and we'll continue to, I mean, I love the Matrix Supergirl, and I'm excited to get back into the Earthborn Angel thing and put that full picture together. But it's just so funny. You look at the post-crisis comics and you look at Superman the Animated Series. It's like two arenas where there's this very clear parameter. Kal-El is the sole survivor. If you want a Supergirl, she can't be the cousin from Krypton. And so on the one hand, you have Bruce Timm and company saying, oh, okay, she's from a sister planet. They're like cousins. Boom. Clean to the point, gets you there. Meanwhile, okay, she's a protoplasm being programmed with the molecular matrix of Lana Lang. She's going to be blasted into this purple form, all this stuff. It's amazing to me. I enjoy all of the stories in various ways, but it's just kind of hilarious. The different spins.
Amount of bending over backwards to justify. Okay, it's not his cousin. They're not related. How are we going to do this? All the different ideas.
Yeah.
But Bruce, yeah, the animated series, they were like, all right, they had their cake. They ate it too.
Yeah. All right. So that was the Kara In-Z of the DC animated universe. Thank you so much for joining me. I always enjoy our chats. What would you like to share with folks about Missing Frames?
Well, check out Missing Frames wherever you do your podcasting. It is the show where we watch all of the movies we should have seen by this point in our lives. And that's everything from classics like The Godfather to fan favorites like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And there's also, last year, it became a Superman podcast because obviously I love Superman. So I interviewed a bunch of my favorite writers, actors, people, like just some of the best, Mark Waid and Tom King, Philip Kennedy Johnson, Jason Aaron, so many amazing people. And you can check all those out. They're all, like I said, I did a film podcast and then it became a Superman podcast. All the film fans were like, why are you now talking about Superman? And now all the Superman fans I gained through the Celebrating Superman part of my show are like, why are you now talking about films again? So there's no strategy. Anthony, what you're doing is brilliant. I need some direction. I need some help. I need you to be the Superman to me as Kara. Guide me, show me the way.
No, you follow your heart and your interest. That's the way. Yes, and that's what you're doing.
That's what I'm doing.
And I encourage everyone to check it out. So thank you, Sean. Thank you, audience. Make sure you keep tuning in. And until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. Support the show and receive exclusive content by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Rewards include our DCU spinoff podcast, advanced listens, sponsorship opportunities, and more. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Please rate and review the podcast via your platform of choice, subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. By popular demand, Digging for Kryptonite merch is available at our TeePublic store. Visit the link in the show notes to get your DFK shirts, hats, mugs, and more. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to Lighting the Bat Signal, a Batman fan journey, which applies the signature Digging for Kryptonite approach to the Dark Knight, as well as another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman, now in its final year covering the classic George Reeves series. Subscribe today. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production. Key art by Isaiah Simmons and theme music by Dan Pritchard.